Welcome to the Compass Conversations podcast. We're a community of professional peers who love learning with and from each other. In other words, we choose collaboration over competition. Every conversation here is organic. Even the opening topic isn't settled until 5 minutes before we hit record. And the rest is riffing off of each other's brilliance. Thanks for hanging out with us in a new paradigm of learning, teaching, and expansion, where presence and non-competitive conversation create the space to learn without having to be schooled. Please visit compassconversations.com to discover more about this peer community and to include yourself as a sponsor. Wonderful and welcome. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for the next Compass Conversation. Today, I'm Carrie Lake. Well, I'm Carrie Lake every day, but I'm here today with Joelle Dunlap, Carla Bauchmuller, Jessica Whiteplume, and Chris Adderson. And as we do at the beginning of each of these conversations, I'll just read the paragraph that sets a foundation for why we're here and what we're up to as we come together from this common sense of heartful presence to learn from and with one another. These conversations are shared from our sense of connection, camaraderie, and love. This community of peers is curious to learn from and with one another, living, learning, and leading by example. We're exploring together, acknowledging the interspecies family on this planet, while lovingly including ourselves in the family of life from the heart, for the heart. So with that, which is at the heart of my heart, with that, I want to welcome Carla to start off our conversation today. And where's your curiosity? What are we playing with today? Where do we start?
So I've really been interested in finding out about the horse's wantings and the human's wantings and how they go together. So the horse wanting to eat and wanting to hang out with his buddies on the one hand, but the horse also wanting the connection with the human and wanting to do something with them, and which is a surprise in itself, right? Why would they want to do that? But you know, this deep bond that they are really longing for as well. And then how do we fit in? And then when the horse says no to something, especially when we're asking them to do something, if they say no to something, what is this? Is that a no because they'd rather go eat grass, or is it a no to the connection? And how do we know, and what do we do about it? Big question, right? Big philosophical question.
Yeah, it's a huge playground, you know, because there's so many ways, so many lenses through which we can look at that. And I guess that's my first curiosity in that is how do you know what you're looking at? Who's listening when the horse says no, right? That's where I take it is, how well do I know myself that I can interpret the no?
Yeah, and then, you know, that actually, the whole thinking around that got deeper for me when I had a conversation with a client who is really doubting her own wanting and desire to ride her horse, and that being more important than what she perceives as the horse's desire to like eat and do something different. So she feels, am I pushing my desire to ride my horse onto her, and is it okay to do? So it's also her self-doubt and her not really having learned throughout her life that maybe her wanting and desire is important, and maybe her wanting and desire can really match another wanting and desire, you can at least find a communication and connection with another being so that that matches and comes together. So she was always like, is it okay? I want to write, but is it okay for my horse to do that with me? So that was that constant questioning herself around that. And then obviously the horse goes like, if you're not really in it, and if you're so uncertain, I think I'd rather hang out with my buddies today. So the horse wasn't really engaging in the way that she could have.
Right. Yeah, I feel like, and I'm really glad this is coming up, because I've wanted to just support those amongst us who have, there's basically some triggers around getting a no, and it often kind of like causes other worries and thoughts to come up, as far as what does it mean if someone's telling me no, and then it connects to other concerns. And in a lot of circles, I see people who love their horses so much that there's a lot of focus as far as mental and energetically on, I might do something wrong, or I have done something wrong. And like you said, that changes the energy that you're bringing to the horse. And when really we're, by and large, for the most part, doing a lot of things right, and there was I think it was another trainer, one of the older, I wish I could remember exactly who it was, but someone said, just really focus on what the horse is doing right, and don't so much put thought on the other stuff. And that really, I know, speaking for myself and just observing, folks that come to ride with me, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference.
Humans are conditioned to categorize our world, right, in terms of right and wrong and good and bad and deserve and don't deserve. And I have never experienced a horse who organizes their world in that way, and so humans have this ability to do what we call taking things personally. And we see something outside of ourselves, and it like reverbs back as if it's all about me. And that's a sort of a slippery stage to stand on, because on one hand we're playing with self-awareness, which seems to be about me, and to have the courage to look at what I might be bringing to the table is a beautiful thing. But there's a line in there where I can take a look at what I'm bringing to the table, but it doesn't mean I have to make myself right or wrong about it. And I think that once a human can step outside of making myself right or wrong about it, it opens me up to see the nuances of what a horse might be communicating, that it might be something different than a yes or a no. It might be communicating like, well, here's how it feels when you show up like that, which is different than, no, I don't want something. The horse might be saying, well, this is what I'm feeling, and here's how I respond. Which is different than a no, and humans, we get to noodle our way through it. Chris, I know you talk a lot about this in your work, or at least I think you do.
Yeah, I do. It's a major component of my program and my work. Because really, when we're with horses, it's a huge self-development piece that we're looking at. And the more we can look at self-mastery and self-development of ourselves, because the horses already have it, right? They're not concerned about things that humans are concerned about, right? Everybody knows what those are, right? Ego, et cetera, et cetera. They don't think in those terms. So it's us, we're the ones who have to work on ourselves. And self-doubt, the things we've been talking about, that Carla was mentioning, and you, Carrie, self-confidence, self-trust, those kinds of things are going to come across to the horse as not reliable and not dependable. So that's where we need to work. is on ourselves. Because like you say, Carrie, when the horse doesn't do what we want or what we think we want, we can take it personally when really there's nothing personal about it. Mm-hmm.
Joelle, it makes me think about the work you do, because you work with not only sensitive horses, but very sensitive people who see the world differently than what's common, per se, what's considered normal, in society. And so I just want to hand it over to you. What are your thoughts about showing up and listening to know? Or is there a different conversation? And you're muted right now. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I have it muted just because there were some people back here. But this is something I've been thinking about a lot. And right now there are horses queued up in a slaughter line, and they'll go forward and they'll go into that. They'll go into the horse trailer that they're terrified of. They will go over a jump that in the wild they would go half a mile out of their way to go around. So is a horse a tool? Is a horse a personal development opportunity? Is a horse something to be conquered? Like you said, Carrie, this right or wrong thing comes from us, and there's an acceptance in the horse that I think is part of the draw of why we're so deeply drawn to them. And so if that's the case, if these horses are going to take on whatever role that we're projecting on them, whether they're our fulfillment of our life desire or whether they're a tool to round up animals that we eat, we just have to take personal responsibility for that. And I realize that that's a maybe a really harsh way to say it. But like I said, I spent most of my career in horse racing, and I do know what it's like to be on a horse that loves to run. And I also know what it's like to be on a horse that's terrified and he's running out of fear. And they're both excitement, right? There's a lot of sparkly energy around that. And so perhaps it's a pretty subtle shift. And so if we've got that student who is so worried, right? Am I making my horse do this? And if we think, if we think of the horse as our dance partner, well, would we wear spurs, to dance with someone? Or are we going to poke someone in the ribs to make them go? I think it's an evolving conversation. And I think the first thing we have to do is just honor the horse's ability to forgive, because they do. And I certainly, I've never met a horse person that I really like that wouldn't really love to send some apology notes to horses in our past. And that past may have been yesterday, I think Elsa Sinclair's notion of would a horse ever choose to be ridden if I didn't have a fence, if I didn't have ropes, if I didn't have this or that, is really fascinating to me. And we're in the middle of a move, and the horses' lives have been upended. And just yesterday, I guess, I had taken one of the young horses, a new arena. He's only been to the racetrack and at our other farm, and put him in the arena with another horse. And I had taught him really quickly through treats to run over and present himself to the mounting block. And he was running around and just being a fool and just silly and sweet. And just because I kind of wanted to stand up on something, I went and stood on the mounting block. And all of a sudden, his eyes lit up and he ran at me and presented himself at the mounting block. And I felt like an 8-year-old girl. I giggled and giggled and giggled because he chose and he communicated and he could have done anything. So, as somebody who has, who grew up in the rough way where you were the rough and tough cowgirl and you didn't start horses, you broke horses, and that's where I was. That never gave me the satisfaction of that young horse all of a sudden his eyes lighting up and him running towards me and presenting himself at the mounting block. But I think we're all on that journey, and I just learned really slow, so it took me about 30 years to get there. So that's all I have to say about that. I'm going to mute again just because there's a little background noise. Is that all right?
Yeah. Thank you. Jess, it makes me think about, a horse presenting themselves, an animal presenting themselves in your world, and in a world of connection with the animals from a place of divine reverence that native cultures had, so that animals would present themselves. That is a thing. It is true. And I would love to hear you, because I could say a bunch of stuff, but I want to hear you talk. And does that land anywhere in your world with the animals you work with and the horses that are your friends now in your life?
Yeah. Well, as far as it does. So as far as a lot of indigenous cultures, the horses, first of all, they were here long before some of the science says they were. A lot of science is actually coming out now saying that they were here before some people had earlier thought. But generally there's an origin story to most things, and with particularly sacred beings or nations like the horses and the buffalo, and different and those are the kind of the big ones. But even there's major stories about the grasshoppers. There's stories about the otter, and the beaver, and how they build their mounds, their homes, as a design for the earth lodges that the Mandans lived in. And so there's like creation stories and all these learning stories about all the different animal nations. And with the horses, it varies by tribe, but there's always a story about how we came to agree to help each other. And that's considered really, like you said, like a divine relationship. And whether someone even is aware of that, because a lot of people are not. A lot of people don't know those stories, or how exactly does that play out then in your day-to-day life. There are certainly a lot of people who don't, supposedly don't treat their horses well, but it's a hard line to judge, because we're always still evolving. Like you said, I could look back at myself yesterday and be like, oh, what was I thinking? So that exactly play out in a day-to-day is kind of hard to say. But I do believe that if you spent some time, if you have that knowledge and you've spent some time praying about it and meditating about it, you carry that deeply within yourself. And so even, it's not like every time I go to the barn I'm thinking of those stories and those origins of our relationship, but it's still deep within me. And so it's going to be a part of what I present with. It's going to be just a general energy of gratitude for what they have given us. And I'd shared on that, at the summit, that's why when you see indigenous horses that are so adorned, and they've got the regalia and the beads and the colors, and it's always in gratitude to them offering to help us, which is essentially to feed us and house us and everything else, because we couldn't get food and hides and everything without them. And so it's this huge feeling of gratitude that you're always going to present. Like I said, if you've someone who's spent some time with that concept, and that's of course not just limited to indigenous people by any means. so I kind of have that going, and at the same time, I'm following Warwick and all of you and the work that's happening, and it comes together in so many ways. It reminds me of when Warwick just posted this video not too long ago about loading his two young horses who had not really, one of them might have loaded on a trailer before, but the other one hadn't. And so he was talking about, of course, the work that he did as far as connection coming up to it and how that helped them to just basically walk in the trailer. But I was also like, energetically, spiritually, where Warwick is, he's just almost, he's just vibrating in a way that says, this is the most fabulous day. This is the most fabulous horses. I'm so grateful. They're at their new place, their new location. Their family's doing so well. They've come to just so much wisdom over the years. Like, he's just carrying all those levels of deep gratitude and joy and optimism, so to me, it's like anybody would want to jump in a trailer with him. It kind of reminds me of that, whether it's from an Indigenous view, but there's like, it's just levels of how you really, what are you carrying deep inside that, so even on a bad day, you're still bringing that, and it's a part of it. I don't know how exactly, there's really not a right or wrong, but I feel like that is a part of what we're doing as individuals, but also as nations. So I do community work as groups, as communities, right? So when we talk about horses, it's not just the one that's standing in front of you. They have like a collective mind hive, so to speak, like we talk about the humans do in psychology or different fields. They have that too. So it's like, what are they saying? What are they presenting us? Is something I reflect on as well too. Not that I have the answers, but try to take some time to reflect on it.
Thank you. You spoke about it being an evolving conversation, and I hope that's always true, and I think one of the beautiful things that we might get to look at is, I wonder if you have to be of an Indigenous culture to really feel and offer this reverence, like, thank you to Indigenous cultures for making it visible. But even if you were, born in Silicon Valley, you can still find within you a sense of reverence and that kind of connection that, to me, it's about offering it. Like you're talking about adorning the horses is an expression of our gratitude for their contribution. Like, what's it like then to be a person who's not of an Indigenous culture, but to find that reverence within themselves and offer it to the horses?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all people, and it's a lot of, like I said, a lot of Native people don't. So it's really just anyone who takes that view. And we're all Indigenous to somewhere. It's all a relationship. It's a recognition that it's not just by coincidence that these horses are in your life, and that there is, if one were to believe that, there are greater forces at work. And yeah, I mean, especially in the circles that we are, I feel like everybody's pretty divine, which doesn't always have to be serious, but I feel a lot of that from you all, which is why, I'm really always so grateful and happy to be with you all, regardless of, backgrounds. I'm really grateful to feel that from all of you.
I feel the same. This is why I love these conversations. To me, every single conversation is divine. And the more that we share this, it's like an invitation to see ourselves as that, and to include ourselves and know ourselves. And maybe that can start to speak to, like, the clients, Carla, you're talking about, who maybe can't see from the perspective that, there's the horses are in your life not by chance. This is not random. what do you think? How is this all landing for you in that conversation that you brought up about the clients who are self-doubting and wondering whether they, have any business being around their horses if they want something from their horses?
Yeah, I love what Jess said about the gratitude. And for me, it's also joy and enthusiasm that we bring to the table. And I find that that's contagious for the horses. And that's always where I try to bring my clients to, that they start feeling that what I call this wave of joy when you've got that connection with your horses and you go, oh, it just feels so good. And that is contagious. That's, I find, something that the horses then feel too, where they go like, that actually felt good. And then you've got these moments of togetherness. And I always find that it's one thing to connect on the ground with the horses, but then and just hanging out. And the other thing is then also asking for them to do something with you, right? That could be like trailer loading, which is still on the ground, or it could still be riding. And how can you, when you are asking the horse to do something, basically, how can you maintain that connection? And how can you maintain the joy and the enthusiasm, and how the horses really pick up on that? And, I've had this one example where I really still don't really know what exactly happened when I had a horse in training, and she had been really difficult to train in the beginning. And I went to a show, and more kind of a little slightly advanced dressage show with her, and she totally acted up in the warm-up ring. So I just spent like 5 minutes to warm up on her back, because I was like, hey, she's a little crazy today. But the moment I moved into the show ring, it was like I was sitting on a different horse. And I know it was partially me being specifically focused and all of that, but there was something else. There was something happening in the horse where the horse was like, now it counts. Now, and everybody look at me. And she moved through this performance, through this show, through this test so beautifully. And there was a porta potty on the side there where the door swung open from time to time. She did not care. She was completely focused. And you're not supposed to talk in dressage shows, but I was at least, in tests, right? But when I was moving away from the judges, I would say, yes, we're doing this. Yeah, beautiful, amazing. Let's keep going. Yeah. Right. So I was really like encouraging her. And there was this amazing connection in the performance between the two of us. And to this day, I don't really exactly know what happened in this horse's brain in that moment, right? But it really felt like she was just in this whole game with me. Right. And she felt like joy as well. And I'm still convinced and that horses, and we had that conversation yesterday, horses can be proud of themselves. They can be like, they show off. That was in her, like, look at me and I'm beautiful, right? So that show off that usually stallions have a lot. She had that in her. And for some reason, that whole atmosphere and everything tickled that out of her. And she thoroughly enjoyed this, and she was more awake and present and moved better than ever before in my training. So that is the other side, when we are asking for performance really, and we get the horses on board like that. I think that's so amazing, and that's also amazing. Why would they want to do it? That's always the question, why would they want to do it? But I think there is something that's fulfilling to them. I cannot say that differently.
Joelle, please.
Well, I guess, as if we think about the horse in the pasture, right? And we always say that, the masters always say that when you induce the horse to behave as if she feels beautiful, then we're doing it right. And I think that's what happened is, here you are, you're on display, you're in the showroom, let's be beautiful. And she came to that, and she did enjoy that. And who doesn't? And, when we see it in the pasture, when you introduce a new horse and this horse says, aren't I big? Aren't I strong? Aren't I beautiful? Aren't I capable? And I think we all, if we're lucky, we get those moments where we get to sit on that and feel that and participate and maybe direct that. And maybe that's what we help, that student who's terrified of a horse's no, and I love that, Carla, that you talked about this contagion of joy, right? And that, I think that speaks to Jessica's discussion of a collective horse mind, right? When we are that herd and we're bringing that joy, and you're bringing that joy in together, it's we all feel it, and maybe that's how we help the terrified student that's worried about, am I doing something wrong? And of course we're doing something wrong, like Jessica said, I was just doing it wrong yesterday, I'm sure.
Right. Chalk that up, no need to judge it. We'll just make it a given, right? We're going to do something quote unquote wrong.
Yeah.
But how can we explore if we're not willing to explore?
I had an experience yesterday. Again, we've moved one of our locations to a new spot, and we're just settling the horses in, and we have this little Lusitano that I actually got from Rupert that we knew was blind in one eye, but we started to get a feeling that he's losing sight in the other eye. But he's one of the steadiest horses ever, like for the kids. I mean, they can do anything, and they have done everything on his back. He's the one you do backflips off of. He's the one, and we jump him on the lunge. He's in a new spot, and I think he's almost totally blind.
Wow.
And we've been just digesting that, of all the things he's been doing for us. As long as we're on the ground with him, or another horse with him, there's nothing he won't do. But we so rarely ride him because he's such a schoolmaster, and he's a pain in the neck. He's that bulldog of a horse. And I got on him yesterday, and every turning leaf scared him, every gate scared him, everything. And I thought, holy moly, he's been trusting us on the ground this whole time. This horse can't see. And what a gift he just constantly gives us. And so yeah, I think it just speaks to this notion that they do have a collective consciousness, and when we are part of that herd together with them, what a joy, what a gift, what an opportunity. And I think, Jessica, your point about coming to the horse with gratitude, leading with gratitude, and continuing with gratitude, the more that's the only thing you can do, right? And that's why I love these conversations, because they just remind us how willing and forgiving and kind and available they are. Like you said, Carla, it's just this, all of a sudden, to bring this joy and this showing off feeling that you could absolutely feel, that was a completely different horse on the warm-up ring.
I find joy for my clients also is the antidote to perfectionism and self-doubt. Because when you're really allowing the joy of these moments of connection to be in you and go through you, then it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It can be that little success that you had, and you go like, wow, that's amazing. It just felt amazing. So you're going with the feeling that it created inside of you, instead of looking from the outside if that was a perfect this or that. So yeah.
Which reminds me to bring back to what Carrie had mentioned early on, is that more and more I find that big joy feeling from like little tiny things, like little tiny movements, little, paying attention and to the nuance. So it adds up to being more of those moments of joy. And wow, look where we are, as you, I guess, become more nuanced in your observations and mindfulness.
Most definitely. That, like, what if that's the whole game of being human, is awareness for its own sake? And our connections with horses are, for some of us, obviously not everybody on the planet, right? Although it might be nice if everybody on the planet was thinking like us, but I'm just saying, but horses are this amazing activation of awareness and joy and partnership and this idea of us all at the same time. Like, what is it to be an us? It takes awareness, mindfulness, and the willingness to be given to. I think for a lot of the riders who I get to play with, and not just riders, but people who play in any realm of life, when that idea of, does the horse want me to be doing this to them? Am I a bad person for asking for something? That speaks to my resistance to being loved, to being given to actually receiving the gift of another's awareness, attention, and effort, right? So there's a huge part of this question of, if I ask the horse to give me something, am I willing to let them give it to me? Not to match some image of perfection, but to actually go, whoa, thank you. Holy smokes, I asked and you tried? Wow. Right. And this is one of the places I love to play. And it's actually something I really appreciate about Karen Rolfe and how she works, that, if something seems to be wrong, change something and try it differently and see what happens, so it becomes playful rather than performance. And that one little shift in awareness, and that it's actually not even little, I think it's a profoundly generous shift in awareness to open the conversation, to say, all right, well, what is here? I'm going to make myself available for what is here, rather than trying to push everything into this tiny little channel of what I think I'm supposed to see. And how stressful is that?
I think it might be a good time right now to talk about the ask. And I personally don't like to view what we do with horses as an ask, because I feel that underneath that there is a demand. No matter how we look at it as an ask, right? I'll ask politely or whatever, it makes us feel better to look at it as an ask, right? And which is a lot better than upping the phases or obedience to the aids. So what I present, and what I'm presenting in my book that I'm writing, is that it's a modeling. So it's not an ask as it would be in a verbal conversation like we're having now. I view things being, as a dancer, as my history as a dancer, I view it as a movement conversation. Okay, so if we look at it as an ask, it becomes a verbal conversation from human to horse. That's not the way horses see it. Horses see it as a movement conversation, movement from us, received as movement from them. And they have the innate ability to mirror and murmur and do all these kinds of things, right? That we can draw upon. So within the movement conversation that I'm talking about, then we basically model, invite, and meet. Okay, so model, invite, and meet. So it's not viewed as an ask anymore. And I find that, we're talking about a shift in the way we see things, shifting that way to see it as a movement conversation rather than a verbal conversation, having the skill to be able to take a thought to an action. And then in the movements conversation, understanding the components of the movement conversation as skills help us to communicate better with our horses. So that is a different perspective, a way of looking at things that I find helps riders to make it the most simple that we possibly can. It's not complex. I mean, it's hard, but it's simple when we understand these concepts and how the horse communicates, and how we as humans have to maybe look at things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I really love it's so much of almost all of our interpretation is through this big like frontal lobe and the whole language logic system, where that's just not where it's not always the best place to camp out, you know. And as the horses are, yeah, I just love it. I love what you're saying, Yes.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, I mean, it's logical for us to do that. That's who we are. We sit in front of computers a lot of the time, and right, we use the frontal lobe, we use our hands more. We don't use our spines, we don't use our bodies in a way that is clear. A lot of the times we don't even understand how we're using our bodies. We don't understand the compensations that we might have that might present unclearly to the horse, which then might cause confusion in our movement conversation. All these things are things I'm writing in my book that and in our program, we really notice help people to get clarity and to change, you know, not to change, but to develop ourselves more from being human beings to being movement beings, right? Which is what horses are really, right? With energy and intention and all those kinds of things as well. Emotional self-regulation, all those kinds of things as well.
Chris, what were the three things? Model? What were the other two?
Okay, so it is in my book, which should be published fairly soon, but model, invite, meet.
Model, invite, meet. Thanks.
Yeah. And a lot of my approach has come from being a dancer, as well as other factors in my life that that made it so that communication, not verbally, was my major way of communicating. So yeah, model, invite, meet. So basically, and there's a whole process behind that as well, that it's too much to get into here, but model, invite, meet is opposite of what an ask is. So Carrie, you were referring to, you know, if something's not going well, then you can just change and do something different, right? That might be part of our model, invite, meet, but the model part, making sure that we are clear within our model, which involves the process of taking thought to action, and then also making sure that we're clear in the way we are moving. Those two components add to the model, and then we are receptive and we're available to perceive from our horse, right? We've already done the work of you know, self-doubt, self-trust, and there's always some of it which is good that all of us have, but when it starts to hold us back and make it so that we're stuck, then it's not beneficial. But yeah, then the invitation, and then there's the meet. And so typically it would be like a ballroom dance couple, for example. And if you can imagine being at a wedding, let's say you're at a wedding and there's two couples that are up on the dance floor. And let's say one's the red and one's the blue couple, okay? So you're watching the couples as they're dancing, but you find that as you watch, you focus mostly on the blue couple. And both of them, you know, it's a pretty picture. Both of them are doing really well. They know how to dance. They've done this before, but you're finding that your focus is always looking at the blue couple. And so you're like, well, wait a minute, I got to go back to the red couple. Let's, you know, and so you pull your attention back to the red couple and you watch for a bit. And then in no time at all, you find you back on the blue couple. So it's like, what is it that draws you to watch that dance couple rather than the other couple? And that is the essence of the hum and the connection and the model, invite, meet that I'm talking about, where you're absolutely drawn. Your horse can't help but want to be with you because of the way you are presenting yourself. in mind, body, emotion, spirit. Your horse absolutely wants to be with you. And that's that connection and that draw to the blue couple, that it's not just aids, it's not just steps, right? The red couple, they know their stuff, they've learned the steps, but they don't have that extra bit of brilliance that blue couple does, that makes you go, wow, or that bit of play, or that little bit of improvisation that makes you go, wow, I absolutely have to watch them. And that's what is intriguing to horses. And that's what gives you the deep, deep, deep relationship that all of us want. And we seek to satisfy ourselves, but also to satisfy them, the horses. So it's a very mutual relationship between the two of us.
Beautifully said. Thank you. There's so
You're
many
welcome.
So many ways, like each of us has I just love that we get to have these conversations, because we're kind of doing that now as each of us relaxes into our own presence to share our passion in this conversation. You know, anybody who's reading or listening or watching gets to watch us feeling the things we're speaking about. And to me, that's the point of these conversations, is exactly what you just outlined, Chris, is to be a human aware of the feelings of what I know, and then put words to it. Right? We're so conditioned to go words first, thoughts first, to scan outside of ourselves. And this is so much, as I see it, Carla, tell me what you think, but so much about what's behind the self-doubt and the fear and the trepidation and the anxiety and the worry, is we scan outside of ourselves looking for something that we think we want to see or feel, but all the feeling we're looking for is back here with us in our own body. And if we can take a break from trying to survive the outside world and instead get in touch with what we want to offer to the horses, what the feeling that we want to bring to it, which perhaps touches on what Chris is calling modeling, you know, what we all call modeling. Perhaps that's an approach to shifting how we are being human in our relationships with horses and one another.
I love your term movement conversation, Chris, because that's really like from my body, mind, spirit to the horse's body, mind, spirit, right? So it's starting really deep inside. And then what I find when that's really working, then it's us in balance, the horses in balance, and then they enjoy the movement as well, right? They feel good in their bodies, and they enjoy that feeling good, and then they start seeking for that good movement as well. So it becomes easier, right? When we ride the horses and we are not touching into that feel good in them, it's not joyful for them, right? But when they can really feel themselves like that, it's not just for us a feel good, but also for the horses a feel good. And I think that is really something that brings so much for the person at the same time, right? Because we are feeling we can do something on this really deep level inside in our communication with the horses, and it changes the person, right? And we talked about the horse consciousness, and I think I actually believe that the horses are here for us to support humankind and in transformation or whatever we need support with, right? And so right now I find that the horses help us to develop certain things inside of ourselves, and that can be feeling ourselves differently. That can also be understanding about how to stay grounded and clear, how to overcome self-doubt, how to stay open in the heart, all these things that are happening in our energy, really, that we cannot really learn that easily outside of horses. yeah, yes, you could, right? But the horses make it very tangible and very real. When I'm next to a horse, it's a big animal. When I sit on them, it's a big animal. I can hurt myself. It's very real. So I have to work with my fear and have to build the confidence back up from inside. So that's I think that's where the transformation happens for the person, that we don't really get doing other things that easily.
It makes me think about Joelle's work as well. We have just about 5 minutes left, and we could go deeper and deeper and lots of different spirals from this conversation. I do want to give us each space if we have anything closing that we want to say, but Carla, what you were just saying just brought my mind back to Joelle's work and the transformation for the people, the movement conversation when you do have the kids out with the horses, and how maybe you could just talk for a second about that exchange as you see it happen over and over, that the horses, the interaction and the generosity of the horses offers the kids, and how that ripples into their families.
I could talk about that a lot.
Well, you only have 5 minutes.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Maybe
well,
go ahead.
When Chris, when you were explaining this process, what came up in my mind is, a 6-year-old child leading a horse, right? Because there's no reason that the horse has to follow that child. The horse knows that there is no ability to physically make it happen, right? But that child has an expectation and brings an innocence and a movement and an intention, and the horse just hones in on that. And then to Carla's point, that you're right, in the work that we do at Square Peg, that does change you when you are able to have this communication with the horse, and the horse comes with that generosity. It does change us. It does, whether it empowers you or whether it just kind of takes out some of the garbage inside. That's what we really see on a daily basis here, especially with people that either because of social anxiety or through other developmental issues don't have highly developed language skills, right? And so they are communicating in something other than spoken language, and it certainly seems to me that those people are feeling heard by the horse, and that's where the real change starts to come in. And that's what I feel so lucky to be able to witness. So, yeah, so I love this conversation because it kind of helps me reorient through some political pain in the neckedness stuff that I'm going through right now, and just, and then realize that this is what we make happen. This is what the horses facilitate. And I got to get back to the real work. So thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Jess, is there anything you'd like to say in wrapping up, or leave us with a little golden nugget from the world of Jessica White Plume? Oh no, your sound, I'm not hearing you. Okay. For whatever reason, Jess's sound just went AWOL, but that's okay. Thank you for being here.
She's gone beyond spoken language.
There we go. I love it. It's her presence that speaks everything now. I love it. I love it. Chris, any words of conclusion or any thoughts that you'd like to share before we wrap up for today?
Sure. To wrap up, I would say, be the couple in blue. right? Be the rider and horse partnership relationship that is not focused on the aids and the steps and the bits and the pieces and the perfection and the right, but be the couple in blue who resonates on a much deeper level, and a much deeper level involving the horse and what the horse wants and how the horse communicates.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, that goes right back to where Carla started, which was, how do we know what the horse wants? I just want to acknowledge how many people are stepping into the courage to learn about themselves in a way that they might get closer to being the couple in blue. It takes courage, like foundational courage, to look at ourselves differently than what we were taught. And so I'm so grateful to all of you for sharing, and sharing your wisdom, and all of us sharing our wisdom, and sharing these conversations. Because like Joelle was just saying, I think it's the listening that is the most empowering thing, being heard, whether we're talking and hearing each other, or if, we can share things that other people listen to and they go, oh yeah, that's how I feel, or it's just being vulnerable enough to a horse to go, well, maybe there's something on the planet that doesn't judge me. And perhaps at some point having that relationship within ourselves, where I can be vulnerable enough to myself that I take a break from judging myself and see how the world looks, for a moment, without all that self-judgment. Anyway, that's what I love about these conversations. So thank you all so very much for sharing so much. And I will look forward to the next time we organize, and we'll see each other in different groups of people in future podcast chats. So thank you all so much for being here, and lots and lots of love to you.